Okay, previously we saw how we can flip cards over, and now we need to do is, so we know we've got our second card here, and we can actually check to see if there's a match. So let's do that condition, and this will be if there's a match, and else means no match. So I'm going to just comment match, and this one is no match. So basically that's going to initiate the turning back of the cards that are already flipped over. So we also need to lock out the game board as well. So I'm going to add that in the next lesson. But for this time, let's just check to see if there's a match, and then we're going to close off the ability to kind of click even more ones, more tiles while we're doing that interval check, and then we'll unlock it after that interval is done. So how do we check to see if there's a match? So we know that we're actually adding into the array those tiles flipped over, and we're adding it into the last two items. So let's do tiles flipped over, and it's going to equal the last. So basically we're going to check to see if the last two items within the array are flipped over. And the easiest way to do this is to take the array and do the length of the array minus 1. So really the easiest way is just to grab that length. So we know that arrays all have the property, so we know that we can do minus 1. And we know that the last two items that we've placed in this array are going to be the last two items, so we'll do array minus 2. So basically it'll do a comparison of both of those values, and if it's a match, then it's going to be console log match. Otherwise, we're going to do console log. And now I'm just wondering how I'm going to simulate a match so that we could test this out. So that is probably going to be fairly difficult, but let's give it a shot anyway. So we know we can fire off the no match fairly easily. We know that this is no match. So basically we need to initiate that flipping of the card back over, and this is where we're going to use intervals. With JavaScript, we have a functionality called setInterval, and basically what this does is this allows us to run a function after a certain time period. So we need to initiate and create the function. We can just do an anonymous function, so anything that's between those rounded brackets will fire off, and we can set a time limit to fire that off. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to output something into the console. So I want to say hello after 5 seconds. And so we're just bracketing off the information, the statement that's going to be running within that interval. So after 5 seconds, I should see within my console hello. So give it a few seconds to run through, and there it is. So we can even set it to 1 second, so we don't have to wait as long. And we can see that pretty much it's instant there. So after 1 second, and we see that this is going to continue to run. So we've set all of these intervals, and it's going to continue to run until we actually clear this interval. So that's what we're going to be doing in this lesson, is where we're going to be using the setInterval method. This is built in JavaScript in order to run a timer in the background. And when there's no match, what we want to do is we want to remove out those last two items here that we have in the flipped over, and run our loop in order to remove out and flip the cards back over that have been flipped. So let's set up another variable here that we're going to call this our timer, and I'm going to just set this to be empty. And then the reason that I'm setting up this as a variable, because this actually gives me the ability to clear out that interval. So we know that now there's no match, and I'm going to set timer, so I got to spell that right, timer, and I'm going to do set interval. So that's the method, default method in JavaScript, and let's call it hide card. And let's hide the card after, so maybe we want to hide it after 3 seconds. So 3000 milliseconds equals 3 seconds. So now let's build out that function that's going to get fired off after this interval. And we called it hide card. And so what we want to do is we want to fire off the actual hiding of the cards because we didn't actually get the right values. So we know that we've got two cards that are flipped over, and we got to remove both of them. So they're both in that flipped over array, and we want to just remove out those last two that are in that array. And we know that what we can do is we can use JavaScript pop to remove out the last element of the array. So let's set that up and do vid. And we're going to grab that tile flipped over. We're going to use the method pop. And what this is going to do is this is going to give us the value of the ID. So we'll console log that out. And we're just going to have to loop this twice, actually. So we can do that as well. We can set that up. So set up variable x as 0 and do it while x is less than 2. And increment x by 1. And put all of this in a loop. And then just clean up our code. So let's see how this works now. Save it, refresh the page, go back over, and I'm going to open up the console there. So we've got not in array, no match, and now we've set that interval. So we see that we've got cards 4, cards 0, and that interval is running. So we know there's a few things that we do need to do, and one of them is actually to clear that interval. So let's use the method to clear that interval so it doesn't continue to run. So to clear an interval, and the interval's name was timer, so we need to clear that out so it doesn't continue to run and remove out items from our array and so on. And the next thing that we need to do is so we've got the element information, so we can do a document. We don't actually have to assign a variable to it. Document, and we're going to do get element by ID, and we know that these are images, so this is vid, and we can reset the source of vid to be equal to images, and we had called it back, so we'll just see. So basically, let's try this out, and this should flip our cards back over. Let's take a look and see what's happening in the console. So there we go. So we flipped our cards back over. And we need to reset that array. So we've got a few issues there because basically we're not adding these in the array and something is still going wrong there. So we do need to take care of that. That's because our calculations are still off. So let's update and bug fix this coming up because we're able to, we need to lock out the ability to add more items into that array while we do the check. So that's what's going on here. So do try out the interval, try it out for yourself. And in the next lesson, we'll do some bug fixing. So that's coming up.